Greetings, everyone. Beggy Beg here, and today we are in the presence of greatness. Yes, Resident Evil Requiem has arrived. Before we dive into some juicy lore, which this game has in abundance, I should note that first up on our list is someone who, from what I can tell, seems to be a common point of contention, especially among longtime fans. We'll be diving deep into the implications of this character in just a moment, spoilers included. So if you'd like to avoid them, consider this your final warning. With that being said, let's get started. So here's where it all begins with this guy. You endure the girl for one last stretch of stealth gameplay as Grace, and then witness Emily undergo a heartbreaking transformation. Grace steps away from it all, mind racing, her despair mounting. Then Victor appears and claims that Grace isn't lost, but exactly where she should be. Then the shutter opens, golden, gleaming daylight bleeding into the canvas. And then there's this.
I've been waiting for you, Grace.
And the questions are immediate. Everyone that encounters him for the first time is essentially asking the same things. Is this man Albert Wesker, just showing off in his new drip? Is Wesker still alive in some capacity after RE5? And if so, is he grappling with the same symptoms as Leon, those of Raccoon City syndrome, aka latent onset T-virus syndrome? Or is this some kind of recreation of the original Albert Wesker, like a clone of sorts, or maybe another of the 13 original Wesker children that was thought to have died, but now turned up? The intrigue just builds and builds, and for me, the magical moment of realization hit when I came across a few key files. The first, Spencer's Research 1. This is one of the most significant files in the game when it comes to establishing Spencer's vision, this time around in particular. We read that, herein documents a theory that uses the T-virus to control memories and will, and that this is essentially the North Star that will guide humanity's evolution. Then it states that, in rare instances, repeated mutations of the T-virus can trigger anomalies, altering the infected's blood, presuming that global infection by these mutated strains will eventually be inevitable. Finally, and this part is crucial to understanding Zeno and many of the mutated infected in this story, those infected by the mutated T-virus strain firmly retain their pre-infection habits and characteristics, while undergoing a blood transformation. Interesting. Zeno seems to have taken on Wesker's physiology, his incredible speed and strength, as well as his regenerative abilities, but he has this quirk that Wesker never had. He likes to smoke. Very simple, but telling. Also very telling are the signature patches of black T-virus symptoms. However, Zeno doesn't really seem to be concerned or struggling with it in the way Leon is. In fact, he's more physically adept and capable than really anyone else is in the entire game, much like Albert Wesker was. Now onto the next piece of the puzzle, Spencer's Research 2. Humanity suffers when the drive and experience of our most exceptional leaders is lost. The ultimate way to preserve such greatness is to transfer those memories to a new vessel. The question we now face is how to harness this incredible potential. The answer lies in the medium of memory, blood. Cells within the blood contain multitudes of information, including factors tied to memory. Thus, since the T-virus grants us control over factors within the blood, it can be hypothesized that harnessing those same elements will allow us to transfer memories from superior individuals. Exceptional, superior individuals, like Albert Wesker. Continuing on. However, for such a procedure to succeed, the host must be able to withstand the toxicity of the mutated T-virus strain while preserving their own intelligence. Sourcing viable subjects will be the key to future research and testing. Bingo! One of those viable subjects must have been Zeno, an instance of this that appears to have been successful, specifically in transferring the memories of Albert Wesker, and presumably the physiological advantages along with them. He seems to be withstanding the toxicity of mutated T quite well, and with no compromises to his executive functioning. The slight disparity in dress and behavior between Wesker and Zeno are best attributed to the quirks of his original self, meaning that, although Wesker's likeness and physical enhancements were presumably transferred to Zeno via repeated T-virus mutations and thus blood transformation, Zeno seems to have retained his desire to smoke and to dress in the peculiar way that he does. The gleaming white as opposed to a midnight black seems like a very purposeful design distinction made to communicate this. Now, you might wonder who did this or why they had done it, specifically for Albert Wesker's blood. Who would even have had samples of Albert Wesker's blood at that point? And who was to say that Spencer even reached a point of success in trying to do this? After all, for those who have beaten Requiem, it's clear that Spencer relinquished the desire to persist in this particular goal, admitting that humans do not know when death will come to them, and that if exceptional or superior people are removed from the gene pool, then so be it. However, before resigning himself to this, we learned that Chloe was able to remain relatively stable after being injected with Spencer's blood and the T-virus, the same girl you play as in the flashback. At the end, it simply says, "We will continue to monitor her progress," which is promising for the researchers' sake. This implies that successes or near successes weren't far from being achieved at all, and that a similar transfer and blood transformation of Wesker to Zeno very well could have occurred, especially considering this last bit. When you make it to the ARC facility as Leon, you discover that the Connections was essentially the dominant organization that oversaw activities performed by Tricell and HCF, both of which are linked to Wesker. In fact, when Code Veronica was released, the precise name of the rival company of Umbrella was unknown, but we know that the Hive Host Capture Force, HCF, was the paramilitary branch of this rival company, which has now been confirmed to be the Connections. Wesker would later engage Excella Gione of Tricell as a means to an end, to help enact his plans to cultivate and disseminate Ouroboros in West Africa. Considering Wesker's longtime affiliation with these organizations now revealed to be under the Connections, it's perfectly reasonable that he'd explore options to have his own blood, and therefore his memories, carried on through T-virus blood transformation, allowing his strength and a semblance of his motives to live on through viable bodies, one of which must be Zeno. It'd benefit Wesker by giving him a chance to enact his plans even if he were to die, which he then later did, and also benefit the Connections by providing them with a formidable weapon, maybe the deadliest and most efficient ever created. Until Zeno throws it all away by injecting himself with Elpus, ridding himself of all viral content and the many benefits along with them, realizes he's been misled for years. That's right, he is seduced by the ability to enforce mind control upon others, so much so that he loses sight of all the signs that Elpus is not a virus at all, but a panacea for all viral infections, effectively precluding any nation from employing viruses ever again. Therein lies the shift in the power balance Zeno had chased after, rather than any sort of successful mind control. However, this is the part of the plot that operates on a bit of flawed logic in terms of aligning his decision-making with his motivations. So, first of all, importantly, he describes that the technology to control another's will already exists, but that it's not efficient at infecting others. He's most likely referring to the many attempts made at controlling or at least influencing others' minds already, such as Las Plagas and the Mold.
The last virus, created by Spencer. Designed to control human consciousness. The technology to control another's will already exists, but it's not efficient at infecting others. I believe Spencer solved that with Elpus.
However, the way he describes it, he's implying that he'd want to infect the masses to wield unprecedented control over billions of people. So the limitation of the prior attempts at mind control was the inability to effectively spread the bioagent, right? And if he believes Elpus to be a virus capable of spreading much more rapidly to others than the individual implantation of something like Las Plagas, then shouldn't he be trying to disseminate Elpus to huge populations of other people? Why is he injecting himself with it? It's as if he forgot or actively disregarded his own logic behind wanting Elpus over any other mind control agent. By doing this, it's like he's wishing to be controlled rather than becoming the one that exerts control over others, which seems to run counter to his aims. Even if it were like Las Plagas, where the controller needs a dominant plaga and the controlled has a recessive plaga, that distinction isn't made clear at all because no research has been conducted on Elpus, which has been sealed away. Elpus is just one thing, and if he used it as he had intended to infect the masses, that would make a lot more sense. It seems very rash and silly for him to have done this. Speaking of forgetting what you're pursuing, it's a little strange that, after Zeno's death, Victor, claiming to be the unwavering loyalist to Spencer's grand vision, seems to want the same thing that Leon and Grace do: to release Elpus and potentially make it widely available, right? So if Victor is truly in the know about Spencer's true wishes in terms of Elpus, as opposed to Zeno, and Victor wants to spread Elpus to upset the balance of power, what exactly is the issue that Leon would take with that? Does Leon want the US to have the upper hand in terms of being cleared of viral infections while other countries aren't? Isn't part of the objective of the DSO and the BSAA to remove power disparities brought on by biohazard agents?
You see the genius? With Elpus, all virus-based weapons are useless.
And therefore, wouldn't eliminating viruses from the equation assist in that regard? I'm not sure, but whatever the contention between Leon and Victor is at this point, it's certainly not clear enough to immediately fight to the death over. Anyway, more Victor stuff can be saved for another time. Zeno represents an attempt to preserve Wesker's incredible physiology via a deadly weapon sworn to the connections. He can be seen as a spinning image of Wesker's lust for power, not in a way that would cleanse the slate of humanity as Ouroboros would have done, but as he envisioned it, in a way that would allow him to actively impose his will on the minds of others, if only he could use something that he mistakenly believed Elpus to be. While Spencer represents a desire for atonement after causing unimaginable suffering and death, and Victor embodies a misguided loyalist who only saw the anarchical, chaotic side of Spencer's vision with Elpus, Zeno embodies the Connection's repeated efforts to usurp and overtake everything that Umbrella started for his own means. In the end, though, he was unable to outwit Spencer or fully execute Wesker's original ideals because he's an imitation, a partial copy with remnants of his old self. Even so, he's very cool before he succumbs to his impatient, unthinking lust and loses it all. What did you think of this character? Do his decisions actually add up in a way that I'm not seeing? Leave all your thoughts in the comments. My goal, as always, is to get you thinking and to hopefully gain a greater appreciation for these stories. We'll catch you next time on The Residents of Evil. Until then, I hope you've enjoyed my honest, non-shilling review of Teemu Wesker.